These are 5 ancient sites that almost everyone online will tell you were built by human hands, and every single one of them was made by nothing but rock and weather. Then 5 more that really were cut, carved, and hauled by people, with the proof still sitting out in the open where anyone can walk up and touch it. The difference between those 2 lists has nothing to do with how impressive the stones look, not how straight the edges are, not how heavy the blocks are. It comes down to one question, and it is the only question that has ever really mattered here. Did the making of it leave anything behind? Because quarrying stone is a filthy, wasteful business. It scars bedrock. It leaves broken tools, waste heaps, abandoned blocks, half-finished pieces that cracked at the wrong moment and got walked away from. Real construction leaves a trail of failure behind it. Nature does not fail. Nature never abandons a project halfway through and leaves the evidence lying in the dirt for 11,000 years. That is the test. And once you have it, you can run it yourself on any site, in any video, including this one. So if you want the sourced version of ancient history instead of the recycled version, subscribe, because the back half of this video has what I think is the strongest piece of physical proof of ancient construction anywhere on Earth. And almost nobody puts it on these lists. We start in the Bahamas, in about 5 meters of clear water off the coast of North Bimini. In 1968, divers found a line of enormous rectangular limestone blocks running roughly half a mile along the seabed, laid out in long parallel rows with a distinct curve at one end. It looked exactly like a paved road that somebody had built and the ocean had swallowed. The timing was uncanny because the American psychic Edgar Cayce had predicted years earlier that evidence of Atlantis would surface near Bimini right around then. The Bimini Road became the most famous underwater ruin in the Western Hemisphere almost overnight. In 1978, a geologist named Eugene Shinn, working with the United States Geological Survey, went down there with a drill and took core samples straight out of the blocks. What came back settled it. The stone is beach rock. Beach rock forms when calcium carbonate in seawater cements loose sand and shell fragments into solid slabs just below the surface of a tropical beach. It happens across the Bahamas constantly. When the sand around it erodes away, the slab sheet is exposed, and wave action cracks it along its natural joints into blocks that look uncannily like paving stones. The cores told the story. The internal layers inside each block ran in continuous sedimentary bedding, the same orientation across neighboring blocks, which is only possible if those blocks formed in place and were never moved. Radiocarbon dating on the cemented shell material returned an age of roughly 2,000 to 4,000 years. Cayce's Atlantis was supposed to be more than 11,000 years old, and in all that drilling, nobody found a single artifact, tool mark, or wheel rut. Here is the honest part, and I am not going to skip it. A few researchers, including David Zink and Dmitry Rebekov, argued the arrangement was too orderly for pure chance, and pointed to smaller stones apparently wedged under larger ones. Those objections were never fully resolved to everyone's satisfaction, but the core evidence, the internal stratification, is very hard to argue with, and it is the reason essentially every working geologist considers this case closed. Second site, the Makran coast of southern Pakistan. When the Makran Coastal Highway opened in 2004, connecting Karachi to the port of Gwadar, ordinary travelers suddenly had easy access to Hingol National Park, and somewhere around the Buzi Pass, drivers started photographing something remarkable. A vast reclining figure in the rock with what looks like a lion's body, a defined human head, a brow ridge, a nose bridge, and something that reads unmistakably as an Egyptian-style headdress, the Balochistan Sphinx. The claim, argued at length by the researcher Bibhu Dev Misra, is that this is a rock-cut monument belonging to a lost civilization, possibly older than the Indus Valley, with a temple complex buried in the sediment around it. Misra's central argument is that no archaeological survey has ever been conducted at the site, so nobody is actually entitled to call it natural. That is a fair challenge, so let me answer it with geology rather than authority. The Makran coastal belt is one of the most tectonically restless stretches of coastline on the planet, sitting on an active subduction zone with mud volcanoes scattered through it. The rock there is soft sedimentary material, mudstone, sandstone, and shale, laid down in alternating hard and soft bands. When wind and salt spray and rain attack that kind of layered rock, the soft bands retreat faster than the hard ones. Geologists call it differential erosion, and it produces ledges, overhangs, and horizontal grooves that look precisely like carved terraces and cut niches. And the Sphinx is not alone out there. Barely any distance away stands another formation called the Princess of Hope, which reads convincingly as a standing woman in a gown. Nobody claims that one was carved. It is the same rock, on the same coast, shaped by the same wind. When a landscape produces a dozen accidental sculptures along a single stretch of highway, the sculptures are the landscape's signature, not a civilization's. Third, a mountainside in Whitehall, Montana. In 1996, landowners clearing forest on their property found something they had never noticed: a wall. 275 feet long, 24 feet high, made of colossal polygonal granite blocks with flat faces and sharp corners, fitted tightly together and running in an almost perfectly straight line across the slope. The largest single block has been estimated at around 90 tons. It became known as the Sage Wall, and it has been described online as America's oldest megalithic structure, possibly older than the last ice age. The Sage Wall sits inside the Boulder Batholith, an enormous mass of granite that cooled deep underground roughly 75 million years ago. When a body of molten rock that size cools and contracts, it fractures. Those fractures form in sets, and in coarse granite, they very commonly form in three roughly perpendicular directions at once. What that produces underground is a solid mass of rock already divided into rectangular blocks, stacked and interlocked, waiting. Erosion strips the softer weathered material away over millions of years and exposes the joint pattern, and what you are left with looks like masonry because the geometry really is orthogonal. The Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology has attributed the formation to natural fracturing and erosion. There is a tell in this case that I love, and it is a language tell. Early promoters of the human origin theory describe the wall as showing horizontal sedimentation. Granite is not sedimentary. Granite is igneous, frozen magma, and it has no sedimentary layers to show. That single phrase reveals that whoever wrote the argument did not know what rock they were looking at. And here is where the fourth site connects. Because one of the loudest voices arguing the Sage Wall is artificial is a man named Samir Osmanagic, which brings us to the town of Visoko in central Bosnia. In 2005, Osmanagic, a Bosnian-American businessman and author, looked at a hill outside Visoko called Visoko and announced that it was not a hill. He called it the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, claimed it was more than 12,000 years old, and said it was the largest pyramid on Earth. He then named the surrounding hills the Pyramid of the Moon, the Pyramid of the Dragon, and so on. Excavations began, funded largely by tourism and volunteer labor, and the slopes were cut and reshaped over the years to look progressively more like a stepped pyramid. The evidence he presented is striking on camera. Visoko has 4 broadly triangular faces, and the northern slope does align closely with true north. Excavations exposed sheets of flat, angular blocks that photograph like paving, and there is a real tunnel network at Ravne nearby. The geology answers all of it. The hills around Visoko are flat irons. A flat iron forms where tilted layers of sedimentary rock erode into a steep triangular face, and they are one of the most common landforms on Earth. Professor Sejfuddin Vrabak, a paleogeologist, pointed out that there are dozens of comparable formations in the Sarajevo and Zenica basin alone. Paul Heinrich, an archaeological geologist at Louisiana State University, noted that Americans see these constantly across the western states. The apparent paving is Miocene conglomerate and breccia that has fractured along natural joint lines. Drilling at multiple depths across the hill found layered natural strata, not construction. In 2006, Anthony Harding, then president of the European Association of Archaeologists, visited the site and said flatly that no evidence at all had been found to support an archaeological interpretation. The association issued a formal statement describing the pyramid claim as a cruel hoax and warning that the project risked damaging the real medieval heritage around Visoko, which is the part of this story that actually deserves protecting. Even Zahi Hawass weighed in, calling it evidently a natural geologic formation. 20 years on, the excavations continue and the tourists keep arriving. That is worth sitting with for a moment because it tells you something about how durable these claims are once they take hold. Fifth, and this one is different because I am not going to tell you it is settled. Off the southern tip of Yonaguni Island, at the far western end of Japan, roughly 25 meters down, there is a massive stone with flat terraces, long straight edges, 90-degree corners, and what look like broad steps cut into its flank. The Yonaguni Monument. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist at the University of the Ryukyus, dived it repeatedly over years and concluded it was carved by human beings, most likely when sea levels were far lower at the end of the last ice age. Robert Schoch, a geologist at Boston University with a doctorate from Yale, also dived the site, scraped the marine growth off the rock faces, and brought samples up. His conclusion is that the monument is natural. The stone is sandstone and mudstone of the lower Miocene Yayama group, deposited around 20 million years ago. That rock contains strong parallel bedding planes along which the layers separate very cleanly, and it is cut through by sets of vertical joints running perpendicular to the bedding. Horizontal beds plus 2 vertical joint directions gives you right angles, flat surfaces, and terraces for free, with no carving required at all. Yonaguni sits in a violently active seismic zone, which fractures rock in exactly that regular way. And the monument is not built from separate blocks. It is still attached to the bedrock underneath it. That last detail is the strongest single argument, and it is why most geologists side with Schoch. But here is the caveat I owe you. Schoch himself has allowed for a middle position, that a natural formation may have been found by people, treated as significant, and modified in places. That is not a fringe idea, it is a serious one, and it remains unresolved. So Yonaguni belongs on this list, but with an asterisk that the other 4 do not get. Which raises the obvious question. If a natural formation can produce right angles, flat faces, terraces, and blocks that look stacked, then how does anybody ever prove that a site is artificial? Here is the answer, and this is where the video turns. You do not prove it by looking at the finished thing. You prove it by finding the mess that making it left behind. Which brings us to Giza, and to something discovered in 2013 that I think is the most extraordinary find in Egyptology in a century. At a place called Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast, a French mission led by Pierre Tallet of the Sorbonne, working with Gregory Marouard, excavated a set of storage galleries cut into limestone. Buried at the entrance, they found around 30 papyri. They are the oldest inscribed papyri ever found in Egypt, and 2 of them, Papyrus A and Papyrus B, are the working logbook of a middle-ranking official named Merer. Merer supervised a crew of about 200 men. His job was hauling white limestone by boat from the quarries at Tura to Giza, and his logbook records the work day by day, trip by trip, over months. His crew made the round trip 2 or 3 times in every 10-day Egyptian week. The diary is dated to the 26th year of the reign of Khufu, right at the end of it, which is exactly when the outer casing of the Great Pyramid was going on. Think about what that document is. It is not a monument, not a myth, not a temple inscription written to flatter a king. It is a shipping manifest. It is a mid-level supervisor keeping track of deliveries so his superiors could check his numbers. The Great Pyramid has paperwork. Second piece of proof. Southeastern Turkey, on a limestone ridge above the Harran Plain. Göbekli Tepe was recognized for what it was in 1994 by the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, working with the German Archaeological Institute. The site is around 11,500 years old, which puts it roughly 6,000 years before Stonehenge, and it consists of rings of monumental T-shaped limestone pillars, the largest weighing in the region of 10 to 20 tons, carved with foxes, boars, vultures, and scorpions, and raised by people who had no metal, no wheel, and no draft animals. Now here is the evidence. A few hundred meters from the enclosures, out on the western plateau, the quarry is still there. And lying in it, still attached to the bedrock it was being cut from, is an unfinished T-shaped pillar about 7 meters long. Had it been raised, it would have weighed something like 50 tons and been the largest at the site. It was never freed. The working interpretation is that a flaw or a crack appeared in the stone during extraction, and with a workpiece that size, a small flaw means it breaks during transport, so the crew walked away and left it. You can see the whole method written into that quarry floor. Channels scored around the intended pillar with flint picks, undercutting from beneath, wedges driven in to lever it loose, and around it, more abandoned pieces, blocks, rings, things that went wrong. That is what construction leaves behind. Nature does not do this. Nature does not rough out a 50-ton rectangular pillar, notice a defect, and quit. Third, Rapa Nui in the South Pacific, better known as Easter Island. 887 moai have been cataloged across the island. Around 288 of them were successfully hauled to stone platforms on the coast and raised, and 397 of them are still at Rano Raraku, the extinct volcanic crater where nearly all of them were carved out of compressed volcanic ash. Rano Raraku is not a ruin. It is a factory floor, abandoned mid-shift. The statues there sit at every conceivable stage of completion. Some are barely rough outlines scratched into the rock face. Some are fully carved on the front and sides, but still joined to the bedrock along the spine, waiting to be undercut and separated. Some are finished and standing at the base of the slope, ready for transport that never came. The tool marks from basalt handpicks called toki are still visible on the unfinished surfaces, and thousands of those picks have been recovered from the site. And lying on its back in the quarry wall is El Gigante, the largest moai anyone ever attempted, around 21 meters long. Estimates for what it would have weighed if completed run to something like 270 tons. It never left the rock. The pattern of abandonment across the quarry is itself informative. Work seems to have stopped in stages, outer slopes first, then the inner crater walls, as though the carvers were retreating inward before finally stopping altogether. That is a human production sequence, frozen. You are looking at the entire manufacturing process, preserved in order. Fourth, and this one inverts everything. In the Charanandri hills of Maharashtra, in western India, stands the Kailasa Temple, Cave 16 of the Ellora complex. It is a full multi-story Hindu temple dedicated to Shiva, with courtyards, galleries, freestanding columns, life-sized elephants, and relief panels running through the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. It is larger in footprint than the Parthenon, and not one block of it was ever carried to the site, because it is not built. It is excavated. The temple was cut downward out of a solid basalt cliff, top first, working down. 3 deep trenches were driven into the rock to isolate a central mass, and then that mass was carved from the roof toward the floor into a complete building. There is no masonry, no mortar, no assembly. It is a single piece of the mountain with everything that was not the temple taken away. It is credited to the Rashtrakuta king Krishna I in the 8th century, based on inscriptions linking the work to Krishna Raja. Estimates for the volume of rock removed range from about 150,000 tons to as much as 400,000 tons. And that is exactly why it belongs here. At every other site, the evidence is the stone that is present. Here, the evidence is the stone that is absent. You cannot look at that void and argue erosion, because erosion does not carve a colonnade with a doorway behind it and a flight of stairs behind that. Top-down excavation is also the least forgiving construction method ever devised, because there is no correcting a mistake. You cannot add rock back. Which brings us to the last one, the site more videos call impossible than any other. Baalbek, in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, known to the Romans as Heliopolis. In the western foundation wall of the Temple of Jupiter sit 3 limestone blocks known as the Trilithon, each more than 19 meters long and each weighing somewhere around 800 tons. They were lifted several meters off the ground and set into a wall with joints so tight they are difficult to see from a distance. They remain the heaviest blocks any human beings are known to have moved and positioned, and people build entire channels on the claim that Romans could not possibly have done this. The quarry is 800 meters away. It is still open, and there are 3 colossal blocks lying in it that never left. The first, the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, Hajar al-Hibla, is about 21 meters long and weighs close to 1,000 tons. A second, found in the 1990s, comes in around 1,240 tons. And in the summer of 2014, a team from the Oriental Department of the German Archaeological Institute, working with Janine Abdul Masih of the Lebanese University, excavated beneath the first stone and found a third, roughly 1,650 tons. The largest cut stone block known from the ancient world, one narrow face already dressed smooth, still lying where it was cut. That excavation is the whole argument. The team documented the working marks on the stone surfaces and dug through the quarry's waste dumps looking for datable pottery and small finds in stratified layers, because rubbish is what dates a site. And the analysis of Hajar al-Hibla indicated why it was abandoned. The stone quality along one edge was poor, meaning the block was likely to fail during transport. So they left it. Read that again. The largest stones ever quarried by human hands were rejected on a quality control decision. Somebody stood in that quarry, looked at a 1,000-ton block that had taken an enormous amount of labor, saw a flaw in the edge, and made the call to walk away. That is not a lost civilization. That is a construction crew. And I want to be precise about what is and is not settled here, because this is where most videos cheat. What the evidence establishes is who cut these stones and when. What is still debated among specialists is the exact mechanics of how the 800-ton trilithon blocks were moved and lifted into position. Proposals involve capstans, pulley systems, lever arrays, and enormous crews, and there is real academic disagreement about the specifics. That is an open engineering question. It is not a mystery about who was there. There is also a distinction worth holding on to, because popular accounts collapse it constantly. The largest cut stone and the largest moved stone are not the same object. The 1,650-ton block was never moved at all. The heaviest blocks the Romans actually placed are the trilithon, at around 800 tons each, which is astonishing enough without inflating it. So there is the test, run 10 times. Bimini Road failed it, because the sedimentary layers inside the blocks proved they had never been moved. The Balochistan Sphinx failed it because the coast is full of accidental sculptures and none of them show a tool mark. The Sage Wall failed it because granite fractures into blocks all by itself and always has. Visoko failed it because drilling found natural strata and no cultural layer at all. Yonaguni is still arguing, and honestly, it has earned the right to. And the other 5 passed it, not because they look impressive, but because the mess survived. A supervisor's shipping records, a cracked pillar still joined to its bedrock, 400 statues frozen at every stage of manufacture, a temple shaped from the absence of a mountain, and a rejected block weighing 1,000 tons, with a bad edge, lying in an open quarry 800 meters from the wall it was meant for. Impressive stone will never tell you who made it. Only the wreckage of the work can do that. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, the sourced version rather than the recycled one, subscribe and stick around. And tell me down in the comments which site on that first list surprised you most, because I suspect for a lot of you it is going to be Yonaguni.